Shmuley Boteach, and you're watching Taped with Rabbi Doug.
We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug. We're gonna see Rabbi Doug on your TV tonight. But Daddy, I want to watch Monday Night Football.
Forget about Monday Night Football. There's no other thing we're going to watch on Monday but Rabbi Doug.
Yeah, Rabbi Doug on TV tonight. We're going to see Rabbi Doug. Oh, everybody talk about Doug.
Shalom and welcome to Taped with Rabbi Doug. I'm here today with my very special guest, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach. Welcome to the show, Rabbi.
Pleasure to be here. Thank you for having me.
Shmuley, you have a number of books that you have written. You've been an author. You are the founder of the Oxford L'chaim Society. You were in Oxford for many years. And now you are a pop author for the most part. You've become popular. You're well known in the whole United States. You do book signings in major bookstores. How did you go from being an Orthodox rabbi, a shaliach, a messenger of the Lubavitcher Rebbe, to someone who became a popular author and someone whose books are now sold in every major bookstore in the country?
Well, I wouldn't say that I went from being an Orthodox rabbi to...
Well, when I say that, you're right, not from, but I say, how did you include that in your path?
Well, the ancient biblical prophecy was that the Jews would serve as light unto the nations. Now, clearly that means that we have values and we have teachings which are valuable to the entire world and not just to our community. So in my years at Oxford, we always had many non-Jewish students who attended our events. The L'chaim Society was distinguished for perhaps at times even having more non-Jewish members than Jewish members, and that was something we were very proud of. To us, that didn't lead to assimilation. On the contrary, it led to principled integration of two communities who both serve God in different ways, but for whom the Jews could really bring... I mean, my dream was to try to bring Jewish spirituality to a much wider audience, and the books are just an outgrowth of that philosophy. So I did it in terms of activism and programming, and now in terms of writings as well. By the way, I wish they were as successful and as pervasive as you say, and may it be so, but not quite.
God willing, even more successful in the future. But I think that a lot of people know you. They see you on TV. They see you in the news. As of late, your newsreels with Michael Jackson and your foundation that you're working on together. Can you tell us a little about that?
Well, we believe that our civilization is under direct threat through the insecurities that are being bequeathed to America's children. In other words, every child has a birthright, and that birthright is unconditional love. That you have the right to be the apple of your parents' eye, the center of their universe. You have a right to feel that you deserve attention without having to be entertaining, that you deserve affection without having to do well at school, that even with all your flaws and all your warts, that you are unique and infinitely valuable. And that's what the unconditional love that a parent gives his child is supposed to engender. What we're seeing today is the exact opposite. We're seeing parents who are really consumed with themselves. They are absolutely obsessed with success, and the result is that they're letting their children being raised by TV and by violent video games. And even without discussing the nefarious influences of the popular culture, too much sex, too much violence, even if it's just the neglect, the indifference that parents show their children are having to distinguish themselves. They're becoming like their parents. They'll also grow up to be workaholics. And we believe that the only way to change this is to reintroduce children to their parents as the number one priority. They have to be reprioritizing their parents' lives, and that's what the Heal with Kids Foundation is all about. It's an initiative. It's an organization that seeks to do large-scale, high-profile activities that remind parents at all times and give them ideas about how they can prioritize their children. So we're trying to get parents to have dinner with their kids again. Studies show that less than 17% of American children have dinner with their parents. Studies also show that 74% of parents had a bedtime story read to them, whereas today it's less than 20% of America's kids. So these are essential instruments that used to be used in order to bequeath to children that inheritance of unconditional love, and we're trying to reinstill it.
And family values in general that go along with that towards children. Tell me, how did you and Michael Jackson first meet each other? Was he, you didn't go to one of his concerts and run into him and meet him. What was your first introduction?
Well, I wish that I would have attended one of his concerts because I was always a great fan of his talent. I mean, he's a phenomenal singer and dancer. Yes. But we actually met through our mutual friend Uri Geller, the famous paranormalist and psychic with whom I've written a book called The Psychic and the Rabbi. So Uri called me up about 2 years ago, and he said to me, I was visiting New York from England at the time, and he said, Michael Jackson's in New York. would you like to meet him? And I said, well, if you really twist my arm, if you really put the pressure on me, I'll try to accommodate it within my schedule. So obviously I was thrilled to meet him, and we had a meeting at his a townhouse that he was renting at the time, and surprisingly our friendship took off. We just felt we had a lot in common, and we enjoyed each other's conversation and company, and
Very nice.
it went from there.
Did you and he ever discuss the accusations that were made upon him, and before you got involved in the society that you've formed together and that you're running, did you discuss those problems and how to deal with them as they're brought to your attention?
Well, there's little that we haven't discussed. I mean, like any two friends, all kinds of subjects come up. I wouldn't say that we discussed how to deal with them, because Michael's been dealing with it ever since it happened. I mean, I just tried to look at the facts. A man is innocent until proven guilty.
Absolutely.
Only one child ever made the accusation against Michael, even though he's around hundreds and thousands of children. And clearly, most experts are of the opinion that pedophiles are repeat offenders. So you would expect that if Michael was guilty of these charges, there would have been a whole slew of children that would have come forward to claim some pot of gold. But they didn't, and to me that is a phenomenal sign of innocence. I think also that the world just doesn't understand someone like Michael. They think to themselves, a guy who's very successful, famous, wealthy, what's he doing wanting to spend time around children? There must be something wrong, is their natural approach, when really that's an indictment of us rather than of him. In other words, we begin with the presupposition that children are boring and they're burdensome and they require too much patience. So if you're a huge superstar, why aren't you like all the other rock stars, bedding a different woman every night, having every orifice of your body pierced? Why doesn't Michael have tattoos everywhere? And I think he should be applauded for that childlike innocence instead of being condemned for it. But I think that there was this natural assumption that anyone who wants to be around children that much must be doing something wrong, when really we have to re-engender our own interest in the innocence of children. Michael and I both believe that God gives us children in order to cure us of cynicism, in order to reintroduce curiosity in our lives, in order to reintroduce imagination and all those things that are childlike qualities that so many adults lose.
Very nice, very nice. Your latest book, Why Can't I Fall in Love, a 12-step program, is available in bookstores now, and I know you're touring, signing books with this and your other books. But I think that the book that made you most famous is Kosher Sex. This is really the one that took you into the public eye. You have written other books since then. We have Dating Secrets of the Ten Commandments and so many others. But way back, you were writing books about wisdom, understanding, and knowledge, basic concepts of Hasidic thought. As you were teaching Torah and teaching Hasidic teachings and Kabbalistic thinkings and so on and so forth, how did you come from writing books on Torah to books on dating and relationships between people? Where did you get your training and your expertise to become an author on these subjects?
Well, my parents divorced when I was 8 years old, so ever since that very unfortunate incident, I have been somewhat consumed with the question of how to keep a man and a woman happily under the same roof for the duration of their lives. Because if men and women can't live in harmony, then what hope is there that Jews and Arabs can live in harmony? What hope is there that Protestants and Catholics can live in harmony, or whites and blacks? In other words, for me, the male-female relationship is the archetypal human relationship. And if there isn't that natural attraction that can be sustained, if they can't find some loving common ground, a meeting place that does lead them to endure together in a relationship, then what hope is there for any of us to ever cure our loneliness? So there was my personal interest in the subject because of my parents' divorce. But then when I got to Oxford, what I discovered was that the students wanted, more than anything else, wanted to talk about relationships. There were hundreds of subjects that could have been discussed. We talked politics, and we talked history, and we talked their career ambitions, but everything kept on coming back to relationships. Oxford is a very competitive city, as you might appreciate. It's a top academic environment, and the students are really they're pushed to perform academically, and that leads to loneliness. They spend a lot of time sequestered in their rooms, writing their essays, in libraries, reading their books, and that's why relationships become important to them. And so many of them just don't know how to sustain a relationship. Colleges and university campuses are quite fascinating when it comes to relationships. On the one hand, people fall in love at the drop of a hat. It's unlike out there in the professional world where people are hyper picky. People are they have much more realistic standards. On the other hand, there's a lot of sexual license, and that means a lot of people get hurt. We used to deal all the time with girls who needed abortions at Oxford and who needed advice about things like that. I think that these students wanted to know, isn't there something more than this, than these empty sexual relationships or these freewheeling relationships that sort of last for a month, they're very intense, and then they burn out so quickly, they sputter out. So I started writing a weekly essay to the students on the subject that was disseminated on the internet. Now, this is when the internet was in its infancy, 12 years ago, and I barely heard of it myself, but students told me this is a really effective and cost-effective way to send out the essays. And after that, they just sort of mushroomed into books, so it just happened, really.
Uh-huh. You have been writing these, and this is really what you go around and you've been touring about and speaking about on TV. Do you still have actual classes teaching Torah? Are you still teaching biblical studies and Jewish studies to students as well?
I do, not as frequently as I did, because I'm no longer a full-time rabbi on campus. I was at Oxford for 11 years, and now because I travel so much, it's very difficult to have one congregation, one community to whom I would administer, because it wouldn't really be fair to them the amount of time that I'm away. My great passion, of course, is to still teach Judaism, and for me, these books are an expression of that. I think we all have to be careful not to narrowly define Judaism. Think about it. For the past 40 years, the biggest explosion in publishing has been the self-help book and the self-help industry, and it's an industry that Judaism almost entirely missed, with rare exceptions, like Rabbi Harold Kushner, who wrote that big bestseller "When Bad Things Happen to Good People," or Rabbi Dean Steinsaltz, who published some self-help books. If you want to call them in that genre, like Simple Words. By David Israel, who published a great book, I think, called Infinite Light or Endless Light. Very few rabbis have entered in the self-help market, which is a great shame, because it's been overtaken by secularists or by friends of mine like Deepak Chopra, who's immensely successful in the self-help genre, and he's very spiritual, but he's from the Eastern Hindu tradition. So for all the Jews out there, and even for non-Jews who wanted to hear a uniquely Jewish perspective, why haven't we catered to them in publishing books that are a bit more populist and which address real-life subjects, instead of it being narrowly defined as a book on the Parsha, which is Jewish? All my books are based on Jewish sources. This new book, Why Can't I Fall in Love, is really an examination of the relationship between Adam and Eve as described in the Torah, and what lessons modern couples can extract from their relationship. So I would like to believe that all of these books are teaching Torah.
I understand. The book, Why Can't I Fall in Love, I would think from looking at it that this is really for somebody who's single and lonely to read. Would someone who is married and in a relationship, and even in a good relationship, would they find this book to be something that they would want to read? Would there be an interest to them?
Oh, I would certainly hope so. The last half of the book is all about why can't I stay in love. Now, the number one cause of divorce today, the primary causes of divorce used to be financial disputes, parental intervention. The number one cause of divorce today is sexual boredom. It's couples falling out of love. It's an inability to retain an interest, to retain passion and romance in a relationship. So it's a crucial book for married couples. That's why so many young people don't want to get married. So many people say to me, why should I get married? All the married people that I know are miserable. All my married friends say to me, you're crazy, you're so lucky that you're single. Why are you envious of us? We're so envious of you. So I hope married couples will read the book, because all of us need to always try to add that spark back into our marriage.
You have been married for a number of years. You have 7 beautiful children. The oldest, I believe, is about 12 years old. And I presume in that you have a good relationship and things are good in your marriage. Tell me, do you use the methods that you teach other people to keep your marriage shiny and bright?
And not only do I use it, I would say the opposite. I don't teach others. I really write to myself, inform myself, to try to be a better husband, a more committed spouse, a more committed father. And I allow people to listen in. I think that preaching doesn't work. Who am I to preach to anyone? I have myriad flaws, and I have my own issues that I always have to deal with. Who am I to preach to people? What I can do is deal with those issues and have people listen in. When my parents divorced, like any child of divorce, my commitment to myself, I was just 8 years old at the time, was that God willing, this would never happen to me. And of course, it's not enough just to say that. If you don't exert very strenuous efforts to keep a marriage healthy, alive, if you don't renew it, then there's no way it's going to stay happy and content. In fact, I don't believe in the happy marriage. There's such thing as a happy marriage. Marriages are made happy every single day. If you don't re-choose your spouse, if you don't reinvigorate your marriage, if you don't rededicate yourself to your relationship on a daily basis, it doesn't have a shot. It's like a business, unless the owner always thinks to himself, how can I rebuild my customer base? If you take your customers for granted, and this is no different. So when people always say to me, I have a happy marriage, I look at them and I say, what are you talking about? There's no such thing as a happy marriage. I know marriages that were, quote-unquote, happy 1 month, and they were with me for counseling the next month, because people do become complacent, and you can't. I think that's one of the beautiful lessons, of the Jewish lessons of marriage, that we actually derive most of our customs about the marriage ceremony from the giving of the Torah at Mount Sinai. Now, of course, as Jews, we have to re-accept the Torah every single day. We don't just do it annually. We don't just do it 3,300 years ago. It's a renewed commitment, and that's the main lesson that we extract from that experience of Sinai. It has to be renewed daily, and the same thing is true of our marital vows. I have non-Jewish friends who were married 20 years, and they just renewed their marital commitment, which is a common non-Jewish practice. And I said to them, I don't understand this. Why only every 20 years? If you can have a ceremony, then do it every day. But I think all of us have to be committed to that ideal.
Wonderful, wonderful. I want to go back for a moment. The Oxford Society and the L'chaim Society at Oxford. Tell me a little bit. People want to know, your background and what you're all about. Is it similar to something that we would know here in American colleges, like the Hillel organizations? Was it a similar organization?
I'd say about 50% of it was similar to Hillel, in that it had big Friday night dinners, and the classes, everything on debates in classes on issues, to classes on Hebrew, and basic things like that. But what made L'chaim special is that the other 50% of it was a world-class speaking program, a debating program that really hosted world leaders. We hosted everybody from Mikhail Gorbachev to Jerry Springer from here in Chicago, and everyone in between. And each of them was asked to speak about a values-based issue. So, for example, Jerry Springer spoke about his parents' flight from the Holocaust. Gorbachev spoke about the possibility of really bringing world peace. We had Boy George talk about repentance, because he had a severe drug addiction, which he courageously weaned himself off of. And when we do all these famous debates, we had Professor Christian Barnard, the world-renowned heart transplant surgeon, debating the emeritus chief rabbi of Britain, who has since passed away, Lord Jacobowitz, of blessed memory, on euthanasia, because Barnard actually euthanized his own mother. And he wrote a book about it called Good Life and Good Death. That's what made the organization special, and that's what allowed it to attract so many thousands of members. We were the second largest society in Oxford's history as a student organization. We really prided ourselves on our being not just one of the best Jewish organizations, but one of the best organizations, period. And that's why so many non-Jews joined as well. Since
you left Oxford, what is there now? Because you took the L'chaim Society and the name back here with you to the United States. What's there now?
Well, I think that to be a rabbi of students is incredibly interesting and engaging. There's nothing like it, because, first of all, they have a lot of time. Unlike people who are part of a community, they have mortgages to pay and jobs to go to and children. My students were with me almost every night. We had dinner together. We went for drinks together. There was a very special bond, and it was very stimulating. And these were very bright kids in Oxford. But I think that to be a rabbi at a university also has a shelf life. After a while, you get a bit older. When I arrived in Oxford, I was 22 years old. I had just turned 22. 11 years later, I was now 33, and it just wasn't the same. And that's one major issue. And the second issue, of course, is that you're building on quicksand, and it's very sad. Every year, you see your closest friends leave, and it's not even like in the United States where everybody is still in one country. Oxford was an international community, people from all over the world. So our students were from Australia and Germany and Africa and the United States and Israel. And every year I'd watch them go, and you're building on quicksand, and it becomes lonely after a while. So after 11 years, I was supposed to stay 4, I stayed 11. After 11 years, I really felt that, with the success of Kosher Sex especially, that I had a window of opportunity to come back to the United States and really allow myself to be what I've always dreamed of being, and that was an exponent of Judaism to a large audience. So I tried to take advantage of that. So we set up the L'chaim Society in New York, which is not a student-based organization anymore. Now we do the lectures and the big debates.
You and Uri Geller, he's always amazed me. Uri Geller, I think, for those of us in the Jewish community, people who know Israel, people who know famous people from Israel, know Uri Geller to be the one who can use his mind to bend spoons. What is your connection? How did you become friendly with Uri Geller, and can he really bend spoons with his mind?
Uri Geller is one of my closest friends. He's like an older brother to me. He calls me all the time, and he gives me advice. We met the United Kingdom Jewish Book Week. Invited us to deliver a joint seminar on prayer from our differing perspectives. Uri as a high priest of the New Age, and me as a representative of traditional religion. And I was amazed at how well we got along, because I had never met him. I had, of course, heard of him. I always wanted to meet him. Can he bend spoons? Absolutely. I mean, we have no spoons left in our home. Uri used to eat with us almost every Shabbos dinner. And all our guests would want to, I'd say to him, Shabbos, you can't break the spoons, but he'd touch them and they'd break in half. But our book really isn't about his powers or anything like that. Our book is about great life issues from our differing perspectives. Because, Uri was very similar backgrounds. Children of divorce, two men with a lot of insecurities who sought the spotlight and then discovered the spotlight wasn't everything that you thought it would be once you attained it, to whatever limited degree. And we really bare our souls. I think few men today really know how to bare their souls. Men have, as all women know, men have a real problem, being emotional and talking about their emotions, and that's what we really wanted to do. And we have a soul friendship, which has been very cathartic in my life.
You mentioned The Rabbi and the Psychic, the book the two of you wrote together. There, you say burying your souls. You have another book called True Confession with him you've written?
It's the same book.
It's the same book.
No, in England, the title is Confessions of a Rabbi and Psychic, not True Confessions. Confessions of a Rabbi and Psychic. In this country, the publisher, or it's here in Chicago actually, decided to call it The Rabbi and Psychic.
I see, because we have it listed here actually. From the internet, I was looking at all the books you have available, and I see two different books. Listen, one True Confession, one The Psychic of the Rabbi, so I wanted to know about that. So it's one book you've written together with him.
Right.
How many books have you written altogether?
I think 12.
12 books. 12 books. And are they all still published currently?
No.
They're not. How many are still published currently?
Probably 7 or 8.
Tell me, The Wolf Shall Lie with the Lamb. What is that one about? Because that's an interesting title.
Well, before, my first 6 books were all on Jewish themes, written largely for Jewish audiences. The Wolf Shall Lie with the Lamb is all about messianism and Jewish thought, specifically from a Hasidic viewpoint. For me, it was a very important book because the Lubavitcher Rebbe, before he died, had called upon people to write books about messianism that were accessible to the wider public. And I wrote that for the wider public, and it actually sold quite well among secular Jews and non-Jews, trying to allow them to understand in a deeper way and in a more modern way what messianism was all about. I mean, here the Jews have given to the world this idea of the Messiah, and it's almost become like a Christian concept. Okay, when you say Messiah, you think of Jesus immediately. But of course, messianism is the engine of human advance. Why do we still think we can cure cancer? Because long ago the prophets promised that we could. Why do we think that we can cure AIDS? Why do we believe that we can end war? Because Isaiah and Jeremiah said that one day men would beat their swords into plowshares. So these aren't empty prophecies. These actually are what stimulate us till this very day to go against the grain of history, which is a history of war, and a history of internecine conflict, and a history of competitiveness, and believe that we can transcend that and really treat each other as kin, as brothers. So I wanted to disseminate that to a wider audience, and it resulted in that book.
What do you think of people like Madonna and those, people in the public eye in entertainment who are studying Kabbalah today? What do you think of that idea of these non-Jews who are studying with rabbis Kabbalah? Do you think that it is a good idea, a true approach? What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's wonderful. I think it's absolutely wonderful. It shows that Judaism is not just a system of ritual, prescribing how we must serve God, which of course it is, and that's crucial. It's the soul of our religion. But Judaism is so much more than that. It's a way to better ourselves, to maximize our human potential, to connect with the one above. And the fact that so many non-Jews, particularly popular cultural icons, are looking at it in that vein is allowing many Jews to re-examine their own heritage. I mean, so many times at Oxford, I would try to get Jewish students interested in coming to Jewish classes, lectures, and they would say to me, I went to Sunday school. I know this already. There's nothing you can teach me. But when they heard that Madonna was studying Kabbalah, suddenly they all would come to me and say, teach me some Kabbalah. So I think it's wonderful. I hope it'll continue.
Wonderful. You, in your last book, Why Can't I Fall in Love, talk about relationships. Do you plan on more books on relationships, more books on Judaism? You have a book teaching about basic Judaism, and that's entitled, don't tell me here, The Jewish... no, that's not...
Intelligent Person's Guide to Judaism.
Intelligent Person's Guide to Judaism, thank you. Intelligent Person's Guide to Judaism, which is kind of basic Judaism for people who are Jewish and not Jewish. Do you plan more books like that, or are you more going off into the relationship?
No, I don't want to be... I don't want to be confined only to the relationship field, although that's my deepest passion, I would say. And relationships are they are what life is comprised of: our relationship with God, our relationship with our fellow man. But my next book, God willing, will be, first of all, I'm writing a book about childlike qualities, co-author with Michael Jackson. It's supposed to come out at the end of the year. I think it's going to be delayed. But there's another book that I'm very passionate about that I just started to do an outline for, called "Why Be Good in a Cruel World?" Because this is a world that doesn't really seem to reward goodness. So why should we be good? And people are finding increasingly difficult to be passionate about being good. What we see more and more is that people are focused on their own lives. So I've really been examining that concept in my own mind, and I'd like to write something about it.
I have not had the opportunity to read The Intelligent Person's Guide to Judaism myself, but someone told me that he recommended it to somebody who was looking into conversion to Judaism, and I just had recently on Rabbi Joseph Telushin, whose book, Jewish Literacy, is something that I've always recommended. Would you say that your book, Intelligent Person's Guide to Judaism, is a good book for a person who maybe isn't Jewish watching our show to go out and take a look and say, this is what Judaism's all about?
First of all, Joseph Telushkin's book is a classic, and it's incredibly comprehensive. This is not like that. Intelligent Person's Guide to Judaism selects about 15 major concepts of Judaism and looks at them very philosophically and tries to really adapt them to... I tried to enrich the concepts so that people really felt passionate about them and understood them. It's a book I'm very proud of. Yes, not only is it particularly suited to secular Jews and non-Jews, but here in the United States, when it's going to be published, I think the publisher's even thinking of calling it The Gentile's Guide to Judaism. Because that title, Intelligent Person's Guide, was part of a series in the United Kingdom, Intelligent Person's Guide to X. But it's an off-putting title, really, when you think about it. It sounds very condescending and patronizing. So I think we'll have a more populous title here in the States.
Very nice. Well, I can't thank you enough for coming back to Chicago, for being on the show today. I wish you much hatzlacha, success in all your endeavors, in not only spreading the word of Judaism, spreading the word of just being a mensch, of a person, people being good to each other, to be good to their children, as you say, to make family life priorities, and which are certainly Jewish concepts and I think universal concepts, which you're doing a wonderful job of spreading. Thank you so much, Rabbi Shmuley Boteach, for being on the show today. Remember, we're on every week at this time, and I hope to see you next week. We hope to see Rabbi Shmuley Boteach again. Maybe after your next book comes out, we'll have you back again, God willing, and just all the best in all your endeavors. And thank you for being with us. Hope to see you next time here on Taped with Rabbi Doug. Thanks again to our camera operator, Adina Rosenberg. We want to wish her Mazel Tov and her chassan Aaron on their recent engagement, and wish you all the best as well. And wish you all the best, all our viewers. Stay with us every week. Shalom.
Bereshis Noach lecha vayera chayes haratoldos vayitze vayishlach vayeshem viketz vayigash vayachiyah shemos vayirabo b'shalach Yisrael mishpatim teruma tetzaveh kisizah vayakel v'kerdei vayikatzav shemini tazriya mitzorach haremos Kedoshim Amor Behar Bechukos Ayayay Bamidbar Naso V'Haloscha Shlach Korach Chugaz Bola Pinchas Matos Mazei Devarim V'Schananei Gavrei Shavtim Kisei Segi Savonim Savim V'Yachazin Ezos HaBracha